In today's show, Eric Griffith, a writer at the Willamette Week, joins, and we ask the question, what are the Blazers even going to do? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube, coming at you every single weekday. Make it part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same as Locked On Blazers, your team every day. Today's episode, a very special one. We are joined by friend of the program and writer who you've read in the Willamette Week and other places in the past, if you've been in the game long enough, Eric Griffith. Eric, how you doing? Thanks for joining the program.
Doing really well, Mike. How about you?
Oh, living the dream. We were just talking off air about the joys of parenthood, but now we can talk about the pitfalls of building a basketball team. The other side of a coin. Today's show, we're just going to kind of look ahead to the summer. Eric has a really measured view and a good understanding of the salary cap structure and all these things. So we're going to kind of look ahead to the summer, look ahead to the Blazers offseason. They haven't played a meaningful game in 2 years. We've been looking ahead a lot with this Portland Trailblazers team, but I'm going to spend some time in today's episode thinking about what should they do. So let's start with the biggest question, and then we'll kind of dial it in. Is the Dame era supposed to end? Is this how it's supposed to end, or do they owe it to him to give it one last hurrah, Eric?
Yeah, so I think the key here is how much more patience he has, because the bottom line is it is extremely difficult to go from 13th in the Western in any conference standings to being a legitimate, non-playing 6-5-4 type of seed. And it's certainly possible to make that transition in maybe 2 years. We've seen the Kings and Suns in recent years both shoot up the standings pretty quick, but realistically, this is at least 2 more years, 2 more off seasons before they're ready to be a team fighting for home court advantage, probably just by reality of where they are. So if Dame has the patience to wait until the 2024-25 season, then I think that is, that's a good sign. If he doesn't, then I think he and Joe Cronin may need to have some very serious conversations about realistic expectations for next season.
I think that's one of the great unknowns is Dame has said very publicly, and to his credit, it hasn't been like a trade demand. It has been I'm 32. I still feel like I'm one of the best players in the league, and I want to be on one of the best teams in the league. He's been very candid about his interest or his disinterest in building. He said, if that's the route they go, that's not my route. But the unknown is how far is far enough? Right? Like if they make some sort of upgrade this summer, but they're say, hey, we're still going to be 7-8 range if it all works out. Is that enough? Right? Can he Jimmy Butler it? Can he feel you know what? Get me into the playoffs. Maybe the other coach won't call any timeouts and we'll have a chance to win the game. Maybe it's possible, as long as, if things go your way and the other team just punts on strategy altogether and Gabe Vincent makes a bunch of 3-pointers, then anything could happen if you're good enough. Or does he not have, Dame has typically had that level of optimism. Does he not have that anymore? Does he see the reality and does he get itchy? I think it sounds like, just reading the tea leaves and everything they've said, they're going to give it one last go. Is that what you think too?
Yeah, it's pretty clear. I think Sean Highkin's been pretty straightforward about saying, this is the year they're going to make the trade, and they know that they have to do it now. I think Dame even said in maybe the exit interviews or around that time, he said, we need to push our chips in. It's time to make the big trade we haven't been able to make in the past. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on what that big trade looks like, and who they send out and who they get back.
What in your eyes, without you don't need to play trade machine with me, but what would a big trade look like? What is the big trade? Capital T, capital B. What does the big trade look like?
Yeah, so you have to look at the assets they have and the contracts they have, and you need to send salary out to get salary back. So really the players, Anthony Simons, especially with the emergence, the other part of the timeline for Dame is that he showed this year that he's still at his very peak of peak. So we can assume he's got, at least barring serious injury, which he's always been very healthy, 2 to 3 more years of high impact play. And Shadon Sharp obviously looked really good. So we're starting to see there's a potential that maybe by 2024-25, there is actually overlap between those two that we didn't expect before. And I think that frees them up and almost mandates that now they're including Anthony Simons as the centerpiece, along possibly with their lottery pick, as the centerpiece of the big trade, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. It's got to be Ant and the 4th pick in the draft or whatever it is. And I think you have to know that you might regret it, right? Like that you might send out. It might be, and I think Shaden Sharp is closer to the Jermaine O'Neal conundrum, where it's like, this dude's good. We don't have a spot for him. We're going to trade him somewhere else, and in 2 years, he's going to be one of the best defensive players in the league. If you're old enough to remember the pain of watching Jermaine O'Neal being so freaking good for the Pacers, thanks for listening.
Dale Davis back.
Yeah, a legend, right?
An all-star once.
Yeah, he was. A friend of mine called an airballed hook shot over the backboard, a Dale Davis memorial miss earlier this season in the playoffs. But so, like, I think there is the Jermaine O'Neal scaries, right? But with Anthony Simons, it's like we've seen this dance before with the Blazers. There is a ceiling on how good you can be with a 6'3" offensive focused guard next to Damian Lillard, and it's pretty good. It's decent and it's consistently decent. But if you want to get over the hump, it probably has to be Anthony Simons. It probably has to be. But you have to know, and along when you're making that trade and making these negotiations, that the 4th pick in this draft plus Anthony Simons headed to another team might feel bad at some point. You might be like, whoops, Amen Thompson is pretty good, or whatever, or whoever it might be, right? Like, I'm not a big draft Nick, but whoever it might be. And I think the conundrum that Blazer fans find themselves in is that regret, knowing that this window to be good with Dame is so small, and that it comes probably with real risks to do it. What is even worth it? And I think that's the problem. And I want to talk about this more in the second segment, is like, you have been a big promoter of incremental moves, incremental improvement. Get better slowly but surely, but make sure you get better, because every move increases your chances. But they're not in the stage for incremental moves. They've moved beyond the opportunity for incremental moves. So let's talk about responsible and right, and what can they even get done in the second segment. But first, I want to tell my listeners about some hardware. That's right. We're giving out the Nissan Player of the Week, and we're giving it out to none other than Anthony Simons. Simons has been electric in his ability to draw people's trade rumors. He's been brilliantly fiercely elegant as people craft the perfect trades on Trade Machine across the internet. That's why he's the Nissan Most Electric Player of the Week, brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. For teams looking for a score-first guard who can get to the bucket, improve driving ability, can really shoot off the bounce, a great catch-and-shoot shooter in his own right, Anthony Simons delivers the duality, the combination of fierceness and elegance. His game is beautiful but strong, much like the perfect SUV crossover, the 2023 Nissan Ariya, which packs pin-to-your-seat power, premium intelligence, all-in-one EV, the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Listen, therapy can help for when you're having a single acute traumatic event, or it can also just help you take care of yourself with routine maintenance for your brain. Getting to know yourself is a lifelong process, especially because we're always changing and growing. And therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and your understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do. And so we talk through things. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be a convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And then if you need to, switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right. Still chatting here with Eric Griffith of the Willamette Week. Eric, you have been in your writing for the newspaper in Portland very clear that the way that the Blazers can improve is through incremental, smart moves, asset management, making each chance you get to get better in the offseason, at the trade deadline, through the draft, making your team something like 3 to 7% better and increasing your odds of winning a championship. The Blazers have been getting worse pretty consistently. They've been actively getting worse pretty consistently. How do you square sort of your logic with how a team like Portland should build with what they've been up to for the last 2 years?
I think the failure to build incrementally really highlights why the team is 13th in the standings instead of 7th or 8th. We can look at how they've used their mid-level exceptions, and honestly, they've gotten nothing out of them. There's nothing on the roster now that was contributed by, for instance, a mid-level exception. They signed Derrick Jones Jr., they trade him in a draft pick for Larry Nance, then they trade Larry Nance for Josh Hart, and then they maybe send Josh Hart back to New York. Then they maybe send the pick they got for Josh Hart back to Chicago for the pick that started all of it. So they got nothing out of that one. Same thing with Gary Payton. We don't know the details of exactly what went on, but if you just look at the outcome, the bottom line is they had a full mid-level exception, and now there's no one on the roster filling the 7th, 8th man role or even 6th man role that you hope for with that kind of investment. Step one, they have to use those exceptions because it's not sufficient just to have Dame and another star. You also need to have a bench, as we're seeing. A super team alone doesn't get it done, and they have not done their work to build up that deeper rotation they need for an 82-game regular season.
Can you do both this summer? Can you take the big swing and also be incrementally smart in how you approach team building?
It's going to require everything to go exactly right. If we look back to the summer of 2013, when they jumped from 33 wins to 54 wins, huge 21-win improvement, everything went exactly right. Terry Stotts found Nick Batum's secret, point forward capability that Nate McMillan hadn't been leveraging. We saw Robin Lopez become a legitimate starting NBA center. Mo Williams was the 6th man they needed. Literally every single player hit their maximum potential that year. And that's something you can't necessarily cross your fingers on that's going to happen. And so you have to give yourself the most number of players who have that upside potential as possible. And so you can imagine a scenario where they have a draft pick, they get the exact trade they need, Dame and the new guy have perfect synergy, and all of their signings work out exactly right. That's a very unlikely scenario. And so that's why I think we need to look at a 2-year continued retooling of the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the perfect summation of their conundrum. They may be under this mandate to fix it by October, or fix it by October to the point where when we get to February and we're making trades again, we're one move away. So we take steps 2 through 7 by October, and then the 8th step that you need, because it is to build up. They were not good this year. They were not a good basketball team. So to build from where they are to where they want to go, it's like you got to get it all perfect. So let's tease this out a little bit. What does perfect look like? So that's the big trade, right? So you trade Anthony Simons and the 4th pick in the draft, which again you might regret doing, for let's just name like one guy who's maybe been on everyone's mind and say Mikal Bridges, right? He's a really good player. He would help. He's the right age. He's under contract for a couple seasons, all of that.
Or Siakam, since Toronto seems more likely to make trades like that. Right? I think there's a couple players at that all-star level that seem to maybe be. It seems like their names are coming up a lot. Of course, Dame's name also comes up a lot, so grain of salt. But yeah, someone like that who is a two-way player, because they really need They essentially need Jeremy Grant, but slightly better.
Yeah, exactly.
Versatile two-way forward to fill out the rest of that front court rotation.
Yeah, so let's say Siakam. I think Siakam's better than Mikal Bridges, but like it's close, and that might be eyes of the beholder. Like whatever you're into, you might be. Someone is screaming at their car speakers right now, like, "You think Siakam's better than Mikal Bridges?" No, I don't know. Like for me, a little better, but again, like one of those two. Let's say it's Siakam. You nail that pick, and you don't have to give up, or you nail that trade. You don't have to give up other stuff, right? You've now added Siakam to the mix. Everyone's dream of having Jeremy Grant play small forward, which he won't be very good at, that'll come to fruition. It's like, oh,
Another
he's
problem,
slow.
though.
It's like, oh no, he's slow. Damn it, and he can't, and he's not much of a passer. Damn it. But
Well, Josh Hart
Siakam
can
would
play small forward then, and they can just. Oh wait, it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so, but you get that. You still probably need another big man. Like, even if you keep Nurk in this scenario, you still need another big man. You need another, like, okay, Nurk's not the guy, too slow tonight. We need to go in that direction. You need more ball handling off the bench and more shooting. So, how does that happen? Well, you've got to either use that draft pick at 23 to get it perfectly correct, rookie who can contribute. So hard to do. It's so hard. It's so hard to find rookies who contribute. So maybe you trade that pick or send it to Chicago and you make another trade. And let's just say like a amorphous trade, right? They acquire 2 rotation level players in that with that pick or set of picks, whatever they do. So now they've got Dame, Shaedon Sharpe, Siakam, Jeremy Grant, Nurk's backup, another backup forward, and then after you do all that, you have to spend all of your mid-level money to get right. You probably need to spend the biannual exception money to hard cap yourself, but really go for it. What is your, just like reading the tea leaves, what is your faith level that if they do the first 2 of those heading into free agency, that the ownership will earmark and say, spend away, baby, spend as much as you want?
I mean, if they're not willing to say that, it basically doesn't matter at this point. The other thing we haven't talked about is that re-signing Jeremy Grant is another mandate, because if he walks, there's no conceivable way to re-sign another $30 million player. So he has them by the short hairs, and will get a lot of money. And they're going to have to spend up to essentially that first new tax threshold line, or that new apron line, I would imagine, to use the MLE and the BAE. And then in addition to all the stuff you're describing, Mike, which already is, turning those draft picks into 2 rotation players, they also need both the MLE and the BAE to hit, and both players to be very good, essentially, to be the 6th and 7th man. And then you're hoping that, Drew Eubanks and Trendon Watford and unknown either rookie or veteran minimum free agent backup point guard signing, you're hoping all of those guys can carry rotation minutes in a season where load management is increasingly pertinent. Which not impossible, like Eubanks looked good this year. There may be another point guard out there who can play backup. But
Skylar Mays, baby.
Yeah. You're starting to rely on a lot of 50-50 coin flips to all hit all at the same time to compete next season, or to fight for home court next season.
Seems simple enough to me. Look, the Celtics did it. The 07 Celtics did it. You just trade for Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett. Rondo pops. It all works. All it takes. It's super simple. Okay, let's talk about the other. So we've kind of laid out how, like, what we think they're going to do, how hard it is going to be to do, but let's lay out the other side to close the show if they go the other way, which I don't think either of us think they're going to do. But what if they do? That's what we'll do to close the show. But first, let's talk about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You're still listening to Locked On Blazers. Still chatting with Eric Griffith of Willamette Week.
Mike, I want to jump in real quick and clarify and point something out. The trend in the league is interesting right now, where we're seeing in the middle of the playoffs a number of very low seed teams upset higher seed teams, which historically is an extreme aberration for the NBA. And so something to watch with the Blazers is that you don't need to jump from 33 wins to 54 wins to become an impact team like you used to do. But you need enough resilience that you're not going to run your top 6 or 7 guys into the ground and then become like, something like a situation the Grizzlies are in where they're maybe not performing at their peak, and they're playing a team that did rest their veterans all season and now is kind of coming into form at playoff time. And so my other fear for the Blazers is if they start chasing 47, 48 regular season wins, if they don't have the depth to back that up at the end of April, all of it is for naught. And so that's the other thing that they need to avoid. And that's why I keep really harping on the depth, because the depth now in the regular season is becoming more of a factor than it ever used to be.
Yeah, I think Joe Cronin pointed this out this week in an interview where he was basically just like, the thing we need to do is build some depth, which makes like all of his moves to this point a little bit puzzling. It's like, yeah, dog, you need 9 NBA players on the roster. How many do you have right now? How many do you have right now? Like, I'm a big Trent Watford guy, like in general. I think, I really like him, really fun, but it's like, if you're penciling him to be a big minute player on a team, you're probably not making the playoffs. Jabari Walker, fun to root for, easy to root for, really good rebounder, but I'm not sure that you can pencil him as I don't believe you can pencil him in as a contributor. Nasir Little, Carolina guy, really great interview, like easy to root for. Didn't take the steps forward you want, right? Like, the depth matters. It's in fact, I think the Lakers are a pretty good example of this. Incredibly top-heavy roster, wonky fit, but regardless of wonky fit, incredibly top-heavy roster. And so what they do, they cleared out some of their older vets to build real depth, and they ended up with, trading away a pick and a salary. But Malik Beasley, he hasn't really played very much, but fills out the rest of the roster. Jared Vanderbilt fills out the rest of the roster. They've, obviously D'Angelo Russell's, he makes every third quarter, he makes 3-3-pointers. Otherwise he's bad, but he does get those 9 points every third quarter, which is valuable. Mo Bamba's not playing, but it's like, you, at least you have theoretical depth for what you had. Like, the Lakers were pretty bad. And so they had 9 to 10 dudes who could play in the league and could contribute to winning. Part of me thinks maybe the Blazers can, if they do it right, they can build, say, okay, we got 4 players that really work. Now we need 5 through 8, and maybe you can find those 8 guys by February. But I think your point, and we've seen it a lot with the Blazers, when you stink in January and then you say, hey, Dame, turn it on. And Dame says, no problem. And he goes nuts in February and March. That is spending the energy that you need in April, because the playoffs are brutal. They last 10 weeks, Eric. They last forever.
And you mentioned Nasir Little, and that's really the perfect example. Like, obviously he's had a lot of bad luck, and we were all pulling for the guy. But at a certain point, you need someone like him who has that upside to realize that upside. And again, if we look at the 2013-14 team, that's what happens. Robin Lopez, Wesley Matthews, LaMarcus Aldridge, like every single player on that roster, Will Barton, every single player on that roster hit their best case scenario. And just, we haven't seen a lot of guys like Nasir Little in those mid-rotation spots really turn into the maximum potential that we're all crossing our fingers for every summer. And we're going to keep rooting for it. But you have to, if you're Joe Cronin, I think you have to start putting that in the back of your mind a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the tricky part about this is like, I've had some conversations with Joe about, guys in the roster, and he's incredibly positive about the back half. Right. But he's not giving me it's like, he's not going to be like, yeah, these dudes stink. Like Trent Watford stinks. Right. But he has real faith.
He's a competent NBA player.
Totally.
He's not in it, like with the Blazers. He's not in the spot on the roster that the Blazers need him. Like, yeah, his spot on the roster does not match his talent level right now.
Totally. And also, like, if you're building a team around Dame, like a small, a undersized, mostly center who doesn't defend the rim, it's just like not ideal. It's just not ideal. He's not an ideal skill set. But I'm rooting for Trent Watford to make 14-footers for a long time in the league, 14-foot push shots for a long time in the NBA. I think your point about the middling teams getting there gives me some hope about the Blazers. In fact, yesterday's show, I said, like, reason for optimism is if you look at the West, like, which team is like really going to take off and become a juggernaut? It might be Denver. They might be really poised to do that, but even they have some shaky depth. It felt like Memphis was going to, but then you get to this season and it's like, there's their half court offense, or get to this postseason rather. It's like their half court offense still isn't that good. And they've got, Obviously, they're missing two key parts, but it's like, is this a juggernaut or is this a team that's also going to have like that come to, whoever you believe in basketball Jesus moment and it'd be like do we need to cash in some chips and get better? The Lakers are old, the Suns are old, the Nuggets are a mess, the Pelicans can't stay healthy. It's like the Blazers path. Yeah, it's like the path to the middle seems relatively clear or relatively possible, but are they comfortable with the middle? I think that's the question. I want to end on this, and I'll let you get out of here. You're a pretty big believer in Shaedon Sharpe. Regardless if this team is like Shaedon Sharpe's team in the fall, which I don't think it will be, or if Shaedon Sharpe is a big-time contributor, can he start on a team that makes the playoffs in October?
Yeah, I think I think the exciting thing about him is he went from not playing any college basketball at 19 years old to the second he stepped on the court, literally his first series out there, he looked polished in a lot of ways. And he plays, he can read the game really well. He doesn't quite have the counter attack moves yet where he can get past the defender who stops his first point of attack, and he'll rely on those mid-range spot ups a lot, but it's all stuff that you could see improving pretty quickly. And so he pretty far out, I think, exceeded expectations last season. So I'm really hesitant to underestimate him next season. But also I feel like we need to be realistic and not put too much, just not expect too much from him either. And so talking about Sharpe right now, I think is walking a very fine line between those two things.
I totally agree. I think the idea that he could be good enough to contribute in April sounds very reasonable based on his track record this year. But the idea that he will hit the ground running and be able to be a super positive contributor from night one might be overstating it because he's 20. Development's just non-linear, right? He might have, he struggled for the first 2 months because they were doing this and this and this, and then he figured out the next level, right? And it's like sometimes you move up a step and sort of teams preparing for you and understanding what they're going to do. Your skill development doesn't get there. And then 35 games later, okay, now I'm ready. I can take that big jump. And
for Blazer fans, let me draw a comparison here. CJ McCollum, the 2015-16 season, we've all forgotten, I think, at this point, he was not the starter going into camp. That was Gerald Henderson. And Gerald Henderson as a solid pre-hip injury backup / maybe starting veteran guard was a really great third guard and safety blanket for CJ and Dame during that year. And so someone like him on the roster right now, I think would be immensely helpful for helping Billups and Sharpe get through those rough patches that we're all expecting.
Yeah. I think the Blazers' best chance for this to work out is they build a team in which Shaedon Sharpe is there very clearly, without a doubt, 5th or 6th best player. And you say, it's easy for, and then by Christmas, he's their 2nd or 3rd best player. And it just, that's the talent jump they need, where they fill out the roster, they get all this depth, and it's like, they're not going to have to rely too much on Sharpe. And if he takes the jump, then it's going to change things. And then he takes the jump. And now all of a sudden you've got a dude who's not going to turn 21 until the 2nd round of the NBA playoffs next year, and which the Blazers will obviously be participating in. And you've built, because you didn't put so much faith in him, you've built a roster that allowed him to flourish. And then when he was ready, he was there. But if you build a roster where it's like, okay, well, they got to pencil in Shaedon for 20 a night or 19 a night. I think that particularly in that first 2 months of the season might be too big of an ask. And then you get to this hustling to make the playoffs mode, when I think the Blazers want to be in the thick of it, win 7 out of 10 at the last week of the season, finish 5th. How about that, Magic? See you later.
Let me, I'm going to throw in some positive. We're talking about Shaedon a lot because he's a lot of fun to watch. And so let me just throw we're not being the most positive today because we're talking about future playoff opportunities.
It's hard.
It is. But no matter what, I'm grateful that this team is at least fun to watch. We're talking about, we all want Trendon Watford to succeed. We all want Nasir Little to succeed. We're looking at this roster, and from top to bottom, they're pretty fun players. They have a lot of energy. They're easy guys to root for. This is not a trying to, grin and bear it and just talk yourself into Carmelo Anthony, Hassan Whiteside season coming up. This is at the very least going to be some fun basketball, and you're not going to regret either walking into the Rose Garden or turning on the TV. And I'm grateful for that because we've had some rough years from the entertainment side of things too recently.
Totally. I think, I think the end of the season, I think the like sort of after that first 15 game stretch, it was rough. Like the season was rough. But I think the end of the season made you feel like, okay, Shaedon Sharp can really play. And if they figure some other stuff out, that can really happen. And, I think Trent Watford showed some stuff. I think if Nasir Little hadn't twisted his ankle at the end of the season, he would have had a final 10 days where it's like, okay, this guy is, the shooting is real and all of those things. So, I think there is reason for optimism for just like general enjoyment. Depending on where you set your expectations for this team, I think you could find a way to really appreciate him, like you said, Eric. Like if you need them to be a home court advantage playoff team and win a playoff series, you might end up disappointed. But if you need to be like excited to watch Damian Lillard, one of the best players in the history of the franchise, still in his prime, and Shaedon Sharp, a really promising 20-year-old, you're going to find some joy in this team. And I think for me and you, the sort of pragmatic, it's hard to build a winner can feel like negativity. But for me, some ways it's just like, let's tease out the logic and set our expectations somewhere that makes sense. And then you can appreciate all the small stuff that makes basketball fun. That is generally my approach. So,
So Mike, let me flip it around. Let me play host for a second. How many wins for you would be a successful season next year?
42.
I was gonna say 43 to 44.
Yeah, for 42. Like I think if they win more than half their games, the way that like how crowded the West was this year, every year's different, but I think they'll be right in the mix. And for me, like I don't, I'm not like deeply emotionally invested in their wins and losses. They don't move me that much. So it's like I won't end up down bad if they struggle. I mostly will be frustrated, but every year I get frustrated. It's like when they pull the plug. If they are competitive to game 82 and going for it with a team that wants to win, and they don't and they aren't selling hope after the All-Star break and be like, yeah, it was a blizzard, so we had to lose on purpose. As long as they're not doing that to me, someone who makes a lot of content about this team, I'll be into it, right? Like I don't, my threshold for finding joy is pretty low. I will go search it out if I need to, but I'll just be realistic about how hard it is to be good in this league.
Yeah.
And
I was literally meaning how would you define a successful season? And I'm on board with you. You said 42 wins. I was thinking if they win 43 or 44 games next season, that's a sign that they did a lot of the things you and I are talking about and that they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Would you consider this season a failure? Just kidding. I know that's the question of the day in the NBA. Okay, let's get out of here. Eric, thank you so much for joining the program. Read Eric's work in the Willamette Week. You can find it online, or you can go get yourself a paper if you need to. He does a great job. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the time.
It's a pleasure, Mike. Have a good day.
You too. Dear listeners, tell your friends about this podcast. Tell them they can get it wherever they get podcasts and also on YouTube. Come back next week. We'll do 5 more of these shows. I appreciate you listening. Talk to you soon.